My name is John Dingman, and I am the Chief Appraiser for Class Valuation. In March of 2022, the GSEs, both Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, introduced desktop appraisals into their respective guides. Now, this is the result of the appraisal modernization efforts initiated by FHFA to allow appraisers to complete these types of assignments, which may include leveraging tools like Class Valuation's property Fingerprint, which allows the appraiser to virtually inspect the interior and exterior of the property from a remote location, rather than completing a personal physical inspection. Now, you may already be completing these types of assignments for Class Valuation or another vendor using similar technologies, or maybe you're just considering if these types of assignments are right for you. In either case, there is a common question from appraisers, and it is related to assumptions. Can an assumption, specifically an extraordinary assumption, be used to identify the relevant property characteristics and to form an opinion regarding the condition of the property? To answer that question, we'll take a few moments to review the definition of an extraordinary assumption, when it can be used based on our general obligations outlined in USPAP, and the assignment conditions included in the scope of work within the pre-printed forms. Now, USPAP defines an extraordinary assumption as an assignment-specific assumption regarding uncertain information that we would use in our analysis to form our opinions and conclusions as of an effective date of an appraisal. The scope of work rule informs the appraiser that they must not allow assignment conditions to limit the scope of work to the extent that the assignment results are not credible. In the context of desktop or hybrid appraisals, the scope of work is spelled out in the pre-printed forms. Now, as an appraiser, we can always expand the scope of work, but not restrict them. If the scope of work places limitations on the inspection or information gathering, then an appraiser must withdraw from that assignment, unless the appraiser can use an extraordinary assumption about such information, and if credible assignment results can still be developed. Now, I've made a habit of regularly reviewing the forms that we sign as appraisers every day, and maybe even more important is reviewing any new forms as they're introduced to the market. The 100470 desktop and hybrid forms were added to your library as early as July of 2020, and the 1073-465 condominium desktop and hybrid forms in April of 2022. Now, pages 1, 2, and 3 are going to look identical to the forms you use today, except for 4 additional fields. The scope of work, statement of assumptions, and limiting conditions, along with the certifications on pages 4, 5, and 6, well, they are different. And I would encourage you to access those forms, which we have included in links in the description below, and either download or print them, and then take a few minutes to review them. The forms plainly state in the scope of work that the appraiser must, not shall, so this is a requirement, must at a minimum obtain and review adequate and reliable information about the subject property. Further, certification number 1 states that the appraiser developed and reported the appraisal in accordance with the above stated scope of work requirement. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have both published desktop appraisal fact sheets. Again, links are also included in the description below, which include the benefits of desktop appraisals, answers to frequently asked questions, and directives to appraisers when completing a desktop appraisal. Summarily, the GSEs have made it clear that the appraiser must, again, not optional but a requirement, obtain sufficient information about the physical characteristics of the subject property in order to complete a desktop or hybrid appraisal. The GSEs are aware of the general obligations placed upon appraisers within USPAP and are consistent with the standards permitting the appraiser to consider and develop any information deemed credible. This includes public records data, the MLS, a prior appraisal report, and property data collection made available through sources like Property Fingerprint. Advisory Opinion 2 is related to real property inspections. And here it is acknowledged that for some assignments, it may be necessary to rely on information provided by other professionals. And when that occurs, we must simply comply with the USPAP requirements related to reliance on work done by others. Those requirements can be read in Standards Rule 2-3C, where it states that the appraiser is required to have a reasonable basis for believing the individuals completing the work are competent and have no reason to doubt the credibility of the work. When one or neither exists, and we cannot adequately obtain reliable and verifiable information about the relevant characteristics, then we have three options. The first is to modify the assignment conditions by negotiating with the client or expanding the scope of work. Now, Desktop does not require property data collection like Hybrid does, but the scope of work was expanded on Desktop by Class Valuation to include property data collection through Property Fingerprint in an effort to ensure that the appraiser has all of the information needed to comply with USPAP in this regard. The second option would be to use an extraordinary assumption, but there is a qualification, and that is only if it is allowed, and we will further explore that option as we move along. Finally, the third option is to withdraw from the assignment or request an upgrade to a traditional appraisal that includes your personal inspection of the property. Expanding the scope of work to include property fingerprint or any other form of property data collection may result in conflicting data. As appraisers, we deal with this today, and specifically when analyzing comparable sales data in both public records and the MLS. When this occurs, we must analyze and reconcile the data and decide which data is most reliable. If credible subject property data is not available, and it is not appropriate for the appraiser to perform the desktop appraisal, then Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac again advise the appraiser to take the third approach and request an upgrade to a traditional appraisal. The FAQs in USPAP include a number of them on extraordinary assumptions. Our focus will be on the 2020-2021 version, FAQs 243 and 244. FAQ 243 specifically addresses the hybrid process, where the appraiser does not complete the personal inspection of the property but is provided with the results from property data collection. Here the appraiser asks, if I rely on the property data collection, should I employ an extraordinary assumption? The answer states that it is dependent on the appraiser's judgment about the reliability and the completeness of the information contained in the report. In our case, the property fingerprint report. There is that word reliable again, and it is your judgment, and as Dr. Sanders Kahn explains in his book, Down to Earth, judgment is the sharpest tool in the appraiser's toolbox. This FAQ goes on to state that if the property fingerprint report is reliable and allows the appraiser to identify the relevant property characteristics and develop credible assignment results, then an extraordinary assumption would not be necessary. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac remind appraisers that it is not acceptable to make assumptions about the condition of the property or its relevant property characteristics, and that we must have data available to us that we consider to be reliable, or the desktop or hybrid is not acceptable. FAQ 244 asks the simple question, can an extraordinary assumption be used without a reasonable basis? Standards Rule 1-2F2 states that an extraordinary assumption may be used in an assignment only if the appraiser has a reasonable basis for the extraordinary assumption. So when does USPAP specifically state we can use an extraordinary assumption in an assignment? Well, there are three circumstances. One is if the extraordinary assumption is required to develop credible opinions and conclusions. Well, we know the scope of work already states we need to have enough information to develop credible opinions and conclusions. Number two is if the appraiser has a reasonable basis for the extraordinary assumption. and we've already established that there is no reasonable basis to use one. Third is if the use of an extraordinary assumption results in a credible analysis and the GSEs are clear that if the appraiser cannot rely on the data and complete the desktop or hybrid credibly, then the desktop or hybrid is not acceptable. To be clear, an assumption, even an extraordinary assumption, cannot be used to identify the relevant property characteristics or to form an opinion regarding the condition of the property. If one is being used, this will result in a condition from our quality control team to perform your due diligence in reviewing the property fingerprint data and report and augment that information if necessary by communicating with the point of contact for entry, which may include the listing agent or the property owner. As a valued partner, if your efforts do not pay dividends, then request an upgrade to traditional appraisal and provide the reason and rationale for doing so, and we will convey that information to our mutual client. If you have not seen a demonstration of property fingerprint, or you have but want to revisit it, then join us. No registration is required, and we host the demos twice a week for your convenience. Once on Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and again on Fridays at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Just scan the QR code on your screen, or save the link that's included in the description below. Add it to your calendar, and we'll see you then. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to review this information. If you found it to be helpful, remember to smash that like button. So you don't miss any other videos, remember to hit the subscribe button. And if you have any questions regarding this issue or others, or you simply would like to learn more about joining our digital appraiser panel, then please reach out to our digital desktop hybrid team for assistance. Have a great rest of your day, and be safe out on your inspections.